welcome back to my channel. I recently did a Q&A on Instagram, just randomly asking you guys if you have questions for me, and a lot of you guys had questions, and they were like really good questions. So instead of like wasting it on Instagram as like a one-off, I want to share with you guys some of the best questions. Hopefully it's gonna be helpful for you guys. So advice that you would give girls in their 20s. Please go crazy in your 20s. Everybody should be wild for a period in their lifetime, better in your 20s and your 40s. That is absolutely true. Like, that is consistent across every video I've ever made. I'm so thankful to have gone kind of wild in New York in my late 20s, and I feel so much more content with life now because I definitely got that out of my system. So do it while you're young. Better now than when you're in your 40s. If you're hitting your midlife crises, it's gonna be worse. Tips on how to expand your social circle after moving to a new city. As I get older, I have less desire to expand my social circle, but when I was younger, I was very sociable. Actually, the most important point being, learn to have an open energy. That is the most important aspect of making new friends. And this is actually something I need to remind myself sometimes now. I just give people the vibe of, I don't care what you think and don't approach me. Okay, so what defines an open energy? That is a very long topic in and of itself. Okay, I do think one of the defining aspects is micro interactions you have with people. So imagine if you're like at a cafe or something and you're paying. Usually what we do is like we completely ignore the people in front and behind us, especially in Singapore and Asia, right? What I used to do in New York is I would always kind of like glance over my shoulder and like smile, kind of coyly show that you're aware of that person's existence, and you know, conversations just happen. And it's not just with men, okay? Like, it's with men and women, and you just, you know, look like you're ready to banter, and good things can happen from that. What made you realize to switch careers, and how do you actually go about it? Well, I've had so many career switches, working in tech to going to fashion school. Okay, so my whole fashion school story, I've talked about it multiple times, but mostly in Mandarin. If you're new to my channel, it's actually in reaction to my father passing away very suddenly, and it was such a huge shock to my system. It was a very long and traumatic process to recover from, but the silver lining was that I realized every day is a gift. Really don't take it for granted. You really don't know when your last day on earth is, so if there's something that you want, get it today. Do it today. Do it for yourself. Also, Steve Jobs very famously said in his commencement speech that life really has no meaning until you understand it in relationship to death, and that is absolutely so true in my case. Moving to New York, dancing, going to fashion school, everything was in reaction to realizing that's what I really wanted to do in life. How do you maintain long distance with your hubby? Well, we've been together for 16 years and we're very secure in our relationship. To the extent, I think we're more like friends with benefits. Yeah, we're like friends with benefits. The best kind of relationship, isn't it? What do you love most about yourself, and what's your proudest achievement? I love my intuition. And the more I listen to it, the more I'm able to take action from it. When your intuition and your actions are aligned, things happen easily. This intuition bit is something that's not obvious, and it's not something that most people would think of necessarily. And intuition takes many years of practice to hone and become better at identifying it. Certainly in Asia, we're not trained to listen to it. It wasn't until I started fashion school, when I started doing mood boards and designs, that I realized that there is this whole other part of our brain. Like, our consciousness only accounts for something like 10% of our brain capacity. There's all this stuff that's going on in the background that sometimes you really already know what you want, but the conscious part of your brain is still trying to calculate and figure it out. And it's actually trying to catch up to it. So a lot of times when we feel like, oh, there's a bad vibe or uncomfortable about a certain situation, it's mostly because our conscious brain and our unconscious are misaligned, and we're just waiting for those two to come into alignment. What am I most proud of? If I had to choose, it would be three things. One, my boys. I know it's cliche, but I really do love them, and I think they're wonderful kids. Number two, actually this, starting Cool Mom Diana. I don't know what I expected when I started it. Certainly I wanted it to be successful, but you never know. And I'm happy that it's sort of proven itself, and I want to take it further. And then actually I realized I'm really proud to be an RGS girl. Really proud. Missing Diana and Tracy vlogs. Are you planning on making one? Absolutely. Dude, I really miss her as well. She's been in Beijing now for like 3 months, and we've been talking about doing
doing a vlog together and we can do like a four-way conversation with her and Donovan and me and Nate. Another bold question. Will you have an affair? And why no and why yes? Now that is a bold question that deserves a very thoughtful answer. I would say that nobody enters a marriage with the intention of starting an affair, right? Like if you stepped into marriage thinking that, oh, I'm going to have an affair, then don't get married. You know, marriage is not for you and there's no right and wrong to that, but just be clear that that's not for you. However, having been married for so long, having been with the same person for so long, life is a very long journey. And I understand that we're all human. It is impossible to be attracted to only one person in your life, even if you're completely committed and dedicated to that person. So if an affair does happen, it's also really hard to say if there's a right or wrong party. And I suggested watching Esther Perel on YouTube. I'll link her links below. There are two videos I want you guys to watch. One on infidelity and two on desire in long-term relationships. This will completely blow your mind about why affairs are so persistent and universal and why long-term desire is so difficult to maintain. I want to normalize any of these feelings of guilt or attraction to other people because it just happens. It's normal to feel that, right? It's how we deal with it and how we understand our humanity through all of this that makes a difference. I think her very best point being that a lot of times, even people in happy relationships cheat. Cheating and affairs is not necessarily a reflection on the character of the person or the relationship. A lot of times people end up with affairs because they've lost their connection with themselves and they're looking for that lost personal identity. And you'll be surprised, a lot of affairs are triggered by a very traumatic life event like cancer, death of a kin, death of a child. And so there's something about mortality that really tends to trigger affairs because affairs tend to make people feel alive. This can be like a whole episode, right? But anyways, Donovan and I are definitely life partners and we want to support each other through anything. All right, what are your views on friends with benefits apart from being one with your spouse? A lot of you care about friends with benefits apparently. Okay, first I'll say friends with benefits, it's a pretty common phenomenon now across most cosmopolitan cities from like New York to San Francisco to LA. So it's very common. I don't make a moral judgment on it, even though I was always attached and never really had an opportunity to partake in said culture. But I think if I was single, I would understand why a lot of people would find it appealing. In a relationship, you're responsible to each other. So, you know, if you want an open relationship, see if you're mature enough to handle it and see if you're mature enough to communicate that with your partner. And if you are, I think there's no moral judgment on it. When will you release the 7 Days of Rice challenge? I hope it's going to be out before this video. Is having kids a good idea? I'm 30, but still not persuaded by it. Worry I might regret though. This is a very important and personal decision that I think every woman needs to answer for herself. I never wanted kids, and look at me, I have 2 kids now. Like, I cannot imagine not having my children. I will say that having kids, especially young kids, will prevent you from doing very many things in life. So if there are specific things you know you want to do, please go do that and don't have kids yet. However, please don't wait around like trying to figure out if you want to have children only to squander your time watching lots of Netflix. Okay, that is the worst use of time. If you know you want to have kids for sure, having them earlier is always better than later. And kids are really expensive. That is a universal rule. If you used to only support yourself and your partner, all of a sudden with a child, you realize that you need something like 3 times your previous income. So knowing that, make sure you're working towards a stable financial future because raising kids when you're not stressed financially is many times more comfortable than if you had no financial security. Raising kids with help also is many times better than raising kids with no help. So just set yourself up in a smart way. Now, kids will give you a completely different perspective on life. And before I had kids, I used to think that people with kids are losers and people who are into their kids are just sad. But now that I've been a parent for 5 years, I honestly realized that no other relationship in life will ever matter as much as that, other than that with your spouse. Also, how did I know I was ready to have children? That's an interesting story. So I had a copper IUD put into my uterus when I was 25. It's 99.3 or 99.7% effective, making it one of the most effective methods of contraception. However, either a super sperm or a super egg somehow got united and I got pregnant. In fact, the gynecologist was very surprised. I was very surprised. We were all very surprised. At that point, we realized we wanted the baby, we wanted to keep the baby, but we couldn't because it had no heartbeat. So we couldn't keep the baby, but it made me realize that I was ready for kids. And then 3 months after that, I got pregnant with Sebastian. How do you decide to step back in your career and uproot to a new country for your husband's career? Now, both Donovan and I are super hyper logical, analytical people. school. I literally whipped out my Excel spreadsheet, started modeling the expected value of us going to China in this new position with this new package versus if we stayed in New York. And we actually put a price and value to almost everything. How much is dance enjoyment worth to us? How much is living in New York City worth to us? How much is making connections in China worth to us? Everything factored in. Turns out the expected value of going to China seemed much higher than staying in New York. Also, we already knew about New York, so we asked ourselves what's the best and worst thing that could happen if we went. The worst case would be he sucked at his job, got fired within like a couple months. It would be kind of embarrassing, would have to haul ass back to New York. But you know what? Even then, maybe that's not the end of the world. So once you are able to accept your worst case, that is actually a very good benchmark for deciding whether or not to do something. Can you accept the worst case scenario? If you can, then go for it. Now, I will say there are certain aspects that was missing from our calculation. I didn't expect China to change us so fundamentally. In a way, we are so naive, live in such a carefree manner, I feel like Donovan picked up a lot of bad habits as a person that we would never accept. He became more egotistical, chauvinistic, like these were things I found it to be unacceptable. But now that we've been back in Singapore for a while, I think we've reverted back to our normal state of interaction. Can you share how you built your investment portfolio? Okay, so my first real investment was buying an apartment in San Francisco in 2009 or 2010. We had just graduated at that point, and then it was at the bottom of the market because if you remember, that's when Lehman Brothers crashed and the world was going to shit. So we were extremely fortunate that our parents were able to loan us essentially the down payment during such a tumultuous time. The best investment advice my parents ever gave me was buy when others sell. Simple. And when it comes to real estate, there is intrinsic value to the thing, right? You look at a building, it's a physical object that's not going to disappear. Stocks can actually reduce in value to zero. Second of all, I like to only invest in places with limited land expansion. Those tend to be island cities or peninsulas. San Francisco was on a peninsula, so it seemed clear that prices were going to go up, even though it had been depressed by 50% at that point. So anyway, long story short, we were very lucky to invest at a good time. That is not an investment opportunity that you can count on maybe ever again in life. And then secondly, because we lived in Silicon Valley, Donovan also worked for multiple tech companies, so he was able to get stock as payment from every single company that he worked for. And I also personally invested in some stocks like Apple. Now we break our investment into 4 major pieces. We have high risk investment, low medium risk investment, cash, and real estate. These 2 are kind of obvious what they are. This one, low risk, are basically all the tech stocks that we hold. They are like blue chip stocks essentially. They're not going to disappear and go to zero. The high risk part of our portfolio is investment in hedge funds. And typically they're hedge funds run by people that we trust and people that we know. Namely, we're invested in QuantEdge, which has been Singapore's top performing hedge fund. The founder is the husband to one of my very good friends. What are your biggest deal breakers when finding a partner? Self-absorbed men. If they can't give, they don't deserve to receive. If given an opportunity to travel to Dubai to work, will you take it? Yes. Do you think sending your kids to a prestigious school is important? Yes and no. I go back and forth on this. I went to a neighborhood primary school growing up in Singapore. I went to Chiang Kai Primary. Chiang Kai Secondary is one of the worst secondaries around, and primary doesn't get very good rap. I was the only person to graduate to go to Raffles within something like a 7-year span, right? So the stats were not great. But I had a good time in school. I had friends. My teachers were actually really good. But me getting into Raffles changed my life. So I'm forever indebted to my alma mater, and I think everybody should strive using their own merit to go to a good school. Is it the parents' job to buy their way into a top school or figure out how they can squeeze their kids into a top school? I don't know. Prestigious schools definitely make life easier though. You don't have to keep proving yourself over and over again. But I also honestly think that we live in a time and age where we can learn anything on YouTube, anything. And I think very soon there are gonna be no jobs. So maybe it doesn't even matter if they graduate from a top university. Have you and Donovan received challenges over the years from xiaosans? Not that I know of. Okay, this I will give Donovan a lot of credit, which is why Li Gongnan is Wang Dao, okay? They're nerdy, somewhat predictable. Of course, the Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates all ended up having affairs. What is one advice that you give your college self? Okay, attend office hours. That is literally your chance to build a solid connection with the professor, which is very valuable. Professors tend to have a lot of connections in whatever industry they're in. So going to like an econ professor's college hours will hook you up with jobs in finance. Second, go to all the Career Center talks that become available, right? Like if companies come give a talk at your school, make sure you get your ass over there and start early.